Hello and welcome back to the next One Piece review and discussion. We are back after having come off a break. We are back with the next installment, and it has been a pretty interesting reaction to this chapter in particular. There is a bit of a shake up to sort of what unfolds and what information we find out about what is happening in the past, specifically what we've been finding out for the past couple of chapters now around Harold's backstory. We are getting more information as we go, but we are certainly focusing on other prominent individuals that I didn't think we'd get this soon, but here we are, and it's fantastic. So, we've got a very interesting one lined up here. Without further ado, chapter 1157, The Legendary Bar. So, cover story comes in with Yamato's pilgrimage continuing. They had arrived in Ringo to go and pray or pay homage to a shrine. And it turns out that this shrine, this hero that they are praying to here in the image, is someone who defended this area against Kaido. So someone who stood up to Kaido, but no trace of the body was left. So now that Kaido had been defeated, they have honoured this individual with this shrine, which I think is pretty cool. But nevertheless, we've got some Elbaf to discuss. So last we had left off, we had quite a big chapter focused around the Kuja pirates, and we got to see more about their time at sea back during the Roger Rocks Garp Prime era. And what we saw was Gloriosa was indeed the captain, Shaki was the first mate second, and then there was Tritoma, with like the three names that we knew anyway, but we got reintroduced to them and a lot younger. And it turned out that Gloriosa might have been captain, but Shaki was the one that everyone adored and sent love letters to and were infatuated by. And Gloriosa had that little bit of spite in her, but again, she wasn't ever like really angry about it. But Shaki was the one who everyone wanted. Tritoma was just kind of around during the scenes, but the main focus was Roger's ship turned up. They all were then getting infatuated by Shaki, but she seemed to obviously have an eye for Rayleigh, which we kind of have seen in the story already. But we saw that Gloriosa had a thing for Roger, which is interesting. But during all of this chaos, we saw Harold discussing with, Loki about like leaving, and Loki is still aspiring to leave and be as free as Rox is. And then the tail end of the chapter was about the Pirate Island, the base that now Rox was setting up on Hachinosu. And we saw Silverax show up now and join the crew, and how chaotic it all was. He created the eye holes to make the skull. It was just a giant rock to begin with. But it ended on a final double page spread of the full crew. Now it looked like a Rocks Pirates, and they have caused chaos so far. And where we pick up in this chapter is in the middle of a chaotic, very frantic escape from a foot colony, a sort of temple of International Philanthropy Federation. And we can see they've taken a bunch of loot. They have absolutely cleared the place out. They are all carrying bags. Wang Ji's like leading the charge, getting them all to escape. And they realise, or they pass along the message as they're escaping. They're like, oh, we need to lower the lift. The others are still down there. And he's like, of course, my bad, hold up. And just chucks a bomb. Throws a bomb down the hole, and we see a very young Kaido and Ed Newgate look up at this bomb as it's descending down the elevator shaft, and they're like, oh, great. And we see the giant explosion come out through the thing. Shiki is maniacally laughing to himself. And basically he is like, now we all get a bigger cut. I did everyone a favour. So we can see that these dudes are in the middle of an escape together and are still trying to take each other out. Or, well, Shiki is. The others probably don't really care. But we see they get sealed in. Bars come down. Big Mum is like, don't worry, I can get us out of this. Before a giant earthquake erupts and the whole island shifts on its tectonic plate, which we've seen so many times before, and we see everyone come crashing through the ground as the building collapses, and there is just one word being shouted, and it's Newgate. And we see Kaido and Whitebeard, after the chaos and the destruction that's happened, Kaido's like, damn, I need to get a powerful fruit like this. I'm pretty jealous, I wish I could do this. And then pretty good advice coming from Whitebeard. He's like, well, if you're interested in getting one of these powers, choose carefully, because the one you get, you're stuck with for life, so make sure you be smart about it. And kind of becomes a dragon, so he chose pretty well, I think, as standards go. But we see they're all still in just a shouting match with each other. They're still blaming like Shiki for blowing up the bomb. It's like, oh, me, like, wouldn't it be me? And Rox walks up, and we can see Captain John is like sort of next to him, and they're talking about like this pirate team debating or arguing that was always going on. And Rox is like, no, come on, we're just leaving, like, stop the bickering. Looks out to sea and just sees like 6 Navy ships waiting, and there's like an interesting moment where they're like, oh, strange, this is a really convenient time for a lot of Navy ships to turn up. Did someone leak the plans that we had come up with to raid this place? And Rox is like, honestly, it doesn't matter at this point. Knock off the infighting. We need to be ready. And then it's just like, screw it. Plans are gone. Everyone plunder everything, and we are going to sink those ships. And we get like a little homage now of like how just decimated these ships get. And the narrator talks about, in just 2 years since their formation, the record of the Rox crew speaks for itself. So they have had 16 documented raids, 76 sunken ships, 14 ports reduced to ash, 5 towns have been wiped off the map, and 1 nation brought to ruin. So in all of these, they have broken 3 unprecedented violations of Article 18 of international law, and 25 criminal records have quietly been erased. So these dudes are nuts, and one of the shots is, and I love it so much, we see Rox just swinging his sword and just annihilating a whole ship by himself. And the narrator wraps up, and I think it is so like obvious at this point in how we've watched this sort of flashback unfold, that even though the future Pirate King Roger is around, we've got Garp and everyone like sailing the seas in their prime, this period is the era of Rox. Like, Rox isn't talked about enough anymore in the current story, because obviously Roger then took on the King of the Pirate and the One Piece took over. But watching this all happen now, what has Roger actually done at this stage, really? We've got Rox out here absolutely causing chaos towards his goal, and who knows what the Roger Pirates are trying to figure out. But we see that we jump over to Harold, and we go to Enishi, which is a neighbouring island next to Elbaf. And Harold's ship pulls up and he's like, whoa, what are you guys doing to these people? Leave them alone. And we see Cypher Pole agents, Whale government agents, are like, oh, these are being dealt with. It's none of your concern, Harold. You're not an affiliated island yet. You've not been recognised, and these people are just like lawless. So we're taking, things in our hands here. And Harold obviously is furious at what they're doing here, and we see everyone's tied up, everyone's frightened, and the dude is trying to be very like cagey with him, and is like, look, you've got a bid in to join and ally with the world government, I've heard, so do you really want to be like intervening here and like getting involved in something you shouldn't? If it's becoming a member nation, I really wouldn't play in your favour to intervene in a non-affiliated country like this here. And we see that Harold is like raging at this point, and the dude's like, just lay it off, and just spins and shoots a woman point blank in front of Harold. I've seen many brave acts in all of One Piece. We've seen a lot of brave moments. This gentleman, however trained you may be as a Cypher Pol agent, looks an ancient giant blood ancestor, looks King Harold in the eye and says, stay out of it, and shoots an innocent person while still holding eye contact. I mean, I think the dude has a death wish, because as we see, Harold leaps instantly from his ship, already sword high, and just cuts down the whale government ship, just absolutely explodes it. We see the little article that's dubbed for obviously the papers saying, King Harold has been exposed. He sinks a innocent ship. He was meant to be allied with the government, but now it's revealed it was all a ploy and all this. And basically he's back at Ina's tavern, just raging. He doesn't seem too happy about what's happening. But so does, Rock. Rock actually finds it quite funny. And he's like, come on, Harold, this is the perfect time. Why don't you just join me and give it all up now? You can't grovel to the government anymore. And we see that Harold has taken on the look that we saw very early on in the pictures. He has now shaved his head, and he's still under the impression that sooner or later Elbaf will join the government. So he still wants it to happen. But Rox is like, oh, come on, like, it's just not going to happen. Like, there's no sign of good faith. And he's like, did you shave your head to, like, punish yourself? Or is it some cultural thing you picked up? But he's like, Garp laughed at him too. So Garp's actually had a few interactions with Harold, which is interesting. But we see Rox's reaction to Garp's name. He's like, oh, yeah, he hates the top brass. He'd actually suit being a pirate, which would be pretty cool to see. But basically, they go down the line in the discussions about, of Elbaf, or specifically Giant, joining the Marines. And the first person to have done it was John Giant. How cool, how obvious of a name. John Giant. He has joined the Marines, and he thinks others will follow suit. And it's like their boundless strength could make a real difference in the world. And Rox is like, oh, the Giants are joining the Marines? That's actually pretty bad. That's actually terrifying if you think about it. But he looks at Anne and he's like, I'd knock some sense into him. And she's like, if Harold was my son, I'd tell him. But, he chooses it himself. And we can see Loki and the kids are watching on this whole conversation. But what I wasn't expecting is we jump over to Navy HQ, where Garp is here arguing for Giants to be able to join. He's like, look, imagine their strength and their power on our side. Like, it's a no-brainer. Why are we turning away the Giants? And it is Kong, who is currently Admiral, is saying, look, if one loses their temper or falls over in the night or, rolls in the sleep, like, people are gonna get hurt. It's very hard for creatures of that size to coexist with us humans of this level. So it's a hard balance. And he's like, look, just let him join. I'll look after them. It's like, all good. So this is obviously when he's a Vice Admiral Gar. We see Sengoku and Atsuru also as Vice Admirals. And they're all talking about what's happening. And Sengoku comes very forward. He's like, look, Harold is an honest man. You know, he's wanting to change Elbaf. He's learned from history here. And, you know, Otsuru's like, well, hold up, like, isn't Rock scouting him? Like, is it really good to stand with him at this stage? And they're all discussing what's going to happen, but they're like, look, he has a wild, violent track record. This is kind of hard to justify at the moment. And basically, Garth doesn't care whatsoever. He's like, we need him. We need Elbaf. Just make him a member nation already. Like, why is it an issue? But we don't get the rest. We don't know if this leads to him joining just yet, but we do see something at the end. However, 42 years ago, back on Hachinosu, the news has just broken that Shakuyaku, the captain of the Kuja Pirates, has now left her post. She is no longer the captain. And we can see all the pirates are just like devastated. They're like, we're never going to run into her again. Like, we can't believe it. You know, we've wasted our youth. And we can see Gloriosa is reading the paper up in like the main area or the main skull where most of the higher members of the Rock Pirates are sitting. We can see Big Mum currently just drinking away with Katakuri, Oven and Daifugu just walking around as kids here. So these boys just grew up on Hachinosu, which makes obviously a lot of sense with how like strong they are, I guess, where we've seen them. But they're discussing Shaki leaving and she's all confused by it, like, what does she intend to do? But, you know, maybe she's just chasing after another man. Big Mum says, you know, just like you did, Gloriosa. And she's like, no, it wouldn't be the way. You know, Shaki was never into those things. But, you know, she couldn't imagine her getting the love sickness. But she was like, I'd never forgive her, though, if she went after Roger. So even though Gloriosa is here, because whether she is obviously still infatuated with Roger is very apparent, but clearly Rox has used the Davy back fights to get her to join his crew, which meant Shaki had to become the Kuja leader. But now she's left. But we see a little moment of again, talking about these romances and stuff. Shaki is discussed, and it is Stussy who says, you know, oh, you know, I only have eyes for one person, so do you. Isn't that right, Newgate? And he's like, I've never been in love with you. What are you on about? And she like starts hitting him and is like, come on, get some sense into you. You know, I'm the legendary Miss Buckingham Stussy here. You know, am I not enough? And he's like, I'll just quit it already. So that's pretty cool. But crazy moment happens where the Kuja Pirates show up to Hachinosu and everyone's freaking out. We see walking by herself as the ship has dropped her off is Shakuyaku has arrived at the island, and everyone is now freaking out. They can't believe the idol, the shining star of the sea herself, has arrived here. And it is in pirate history that this incident is among the greatest ever to have been seen, currently or yet to come, on the pirate island. So everything we've seen so far on Hachinosu, what happened here is actually far greater. And the most beautiful idol has arrived to the hive of murderous fiends, and they are all fawning over her. She's like basically saying, you know, I'm just gonna live out here for a while. You know, I know Gloriosa's over here somewhere, but everyone is freaking out. It's like, oh, the Marines are obviously after her now. And she's like, oh, well, I can't go anywhere else, wherever I was going to leave to. And the Marines are still going to chase me because I'll always be a pirate. So I'm going to hide out here, but you'll all protect me, right? And they're all like, we will die for Shakuyaku. Like, they are all like, Shaki, we will absolutely die for you right away. We will make sure no Marines get by. And we see Rox and the boys rock over. It's like, what is this racket? What is going on? Looks directly at Shaki and is like, wait, what's happening? And we see full page spread here of Shaki's rip-off bar has been opened on Hachinosu. So Shaki's bar that we saw on Sabaody is like a tiny little like hole thing that was just like out to the side. This is like a full spread of things. She's changed her outfit now. She's got like her apron on. She's all like tidied up, and she's like, oh, my first customers are here. Why don't you all come on in? And we see all the boys here are just, again, infatuated by this angel. They're like, Shaki, like, yeah, 100%, this is amazing. They are all overwhelmed. And it is said that this place was like oversubscribed. Like, if you wanted to get in, you had to wait nearly over a month to try and get into this bar. So clearly she had a very strong effect here, but it left a good impression. The inhabitants of Hachinosu came to covet this place very fondly. It was a irreplaceable crown jewel. However, unfortunately, a treasure is always the inevitable target of theft. So we end on a very somber moment. We go back to the room of authority in Marijois with the 5 elders sat around the table together, and they are talking to Harold on a transponder snail. And they say, Harold, there is only one way, one condition that Elbaf can be a affiliated country. The warriors of Elbaf must kill Rox. And that is where the chapter ends, which is crazy because this could be the likely scenario now of how Rox ended up dying, betrayed by someone he trusted like Harold, because they do have a very, very close relationship now. But Harold is very, very, keen on trying to get his country to side the world government. And we know the reason the Gods Knights or the Holy Knights have showed up is because of what Harold did. So there's still something around what is happening. So we've still probably got a few chapters, unless Oda doesn't want to go into it just yet and makes us go back. But I think we're definitely going to see what Harold's decision is, because it's impacting on Loki currently in the story and what happens to Harold's death. So I think we're building up to that moment and how he's going to turn on Rox, or he doesn't turn on Rox, and then the government turn on Harold, and how it all unfolds. We'll see what Oda's got planned, but certainly is very interesting. So thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this chapter, and I will see you guys next time.